Welcome to today's explainer. Today we're going to untangle what is basically a 2,000-year-old game of philosophical telephone. We are looking at a system of thought that profoundly shaped human history, yet somehow got spectacularly twisted along the way. So get ready, because we're about to fundamentally challenge how we understand ancient Eastern philosophy.
Imagine a wisdom so profound it was literally designed to free your mind from all its self-made traps. But then, imagine that same wisdom getting twisted, boxed in, and turned into this bizarre caricature of itself for centuries, and not just by its critics, but by its own followers. So it really begs the question, what if one of history's greatest philosophies was just completely misunderstood?
Well, to answer that, we're basing our entire explainer today on a really rigorous 2001 academic reappraisal by the philosopher G.C. Nayak. The book is called Mādhyamika Śūnyatā, a reappraisal. It dives deep into the Buddhist teachings of the ancient philosopher Nagarjuna and his main commentator Chandrakirti. And Nayak's detective work on this, it actually started all the way back in the 1950s. He spent decades, literally decades, poring over the original Sanskrit texts, just trying to figure out exactly where the rest of the world went wrong in translating these ideas.
Section 1. A historic misunderstanding.
Just look at how deep this prejudice ran. I mean, the incredibly influential 8th century philosopher Sankara just dismissed the entire Mādhyamika philosophy outright. He actually stated, "A doctrine invalidated by all means of valid knowledge is not even worthy of refutation." Think about that. Sankara, whose ideas completely dominated the intellectual landscape back then, felt absolutely no scruples about tossing it in the trash. He thought the philosophy was so absurd it didn't even deserve a proper debate. But, as Nayak discovered, Sankara was actually attacking a total straw man.
Section 2. The false extremes.
Okay, so what exactly was this straw man? Basically, the philosophy was violently shoved into two completely incorrect, rigid little boxes. On one hand, you have nihilism, right? The idea of a literal void, this depressing plunge into absolute nothingness. This was the main accusation from orthodox critics who claimed the whole thing was just some bleak supervoid. Then, on the other hand, you have absolutism. This was an interpretation by later scholars who tried to turn it into a doctrine about some supreme transcendent reality. But here's the kicker. Nayak proves, right from the original texts, that Mādhyamika thought rigorously and explicitly rejects both of these extremes. No void, no ultimate reality. Nayak realized pretty quickly that if we're ever going to do even a semblance of justice to this ancient thought, we have got to throw away our obsession with sticking things into rigid, preconceived isms. Seriously, we can't look at this through the lens of nihilism or absolutism or any other categorical box we want to force it into. To truly understand their philosophy, we have to meet them entirely on their own terms.
Section 3. What is Sunyana?
So if it isn't nothingness and it isn't some ultimate reality, what on earth is it? Well, Śūnyatā, often spelled Sunyata in English, is absolutely not a literal void. That is a super widespread and frankly fatal mistranslation. Instead, within the Mādhyamika framework, it actually means the essencelessness of concepts and things. The original Sanskrit term Nayak points us to here is nisvabhavata. And honestly, that is a completely different paradigm than just staring into some empty black hole of nothingness. To put it even more plainly, it means that things and concepts are destitute of self-being, meaning nothing, literally no physical object, no human emotion, no grand philosophical concept has a permanent, independent, isolated essence. Think about it like this. A wave isn't completely separate from the ocean, right? It exists entirely in relation to other forces like wind and currents. Everything is contingent in exactly this way. And the brilliant part is, when you realize that concepts lack this rigid, unchangeable essence, you just naturally stop clinging to them so tightly.
Section 4. The danger of doctrine.
Now, there is a deep, profound irony in how Śūnyatā has actually been taught over the centuries, because at its core, Śūnyatā is a tool to break doctrines. So the ultimate tragedy here, as Nayak points out, is that people turn Śūnyatā itself into a doctrine. They turn it into a rigid theory. But treating it that way completely defeats the whole purpose. It was designed to be a philosophical medicine, a cure for the human mind's addiction to rigid dogmas. And obviously, once you turn the cure into just another rigid dogma, you've completely missed the point.
But you can see this concept grasped absolutely perfectly in some later traditions. In fact, the text gives us this incredible kind of shocking quote from Zen master Shen Qian. He says, "Nirvana and Bodhi," which means enlightenment, "are dead stumps to tie your donkey to." Just think about that for a second. He is explicitly telling his followers to let go of even the highest, most sacred Buddhist concepts. Why would he say that? Because if you cling to the concept of enlightenment as some rigid essence, you are still trapped by doctrine. You're still tied up. You're just tied to a different stump.
Section 5. The Path to Enlightenment. So, you might be wondering, if we aren't supposed to cling to anything at all, what's the point of all this? Well, the true purpose of Śūnyatā is actually intensely practical. It's an active path meant to eradicate our misconceptions. It's designed to help us avoid those sticky metaphysical traps, the endless, pointless arguments about ultimate reality or absolute nothingness. But above all, it's meant to eliminate the mind. Because truly understanding essencelessness isn't some depressing plunge into nihilism. It's actually this incredibly liberating realization that frees you from the rigid concepts that are causing your suffering in the first place.
Which really leaves us with a final thought to consider today. If this 2,000-year-old philosophy is right, and every single concept, every label, and every ism is truly essenceless, what rigid beliefs are you currently holding on to? What doctrines are you using as a dead stump to tie your donkey to? Taking a metaphorical sledgehammer to our own preconceived notions might just be the most liberating thing we can do. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and as always, keep questioning everything.